We're in the kitchen at the Equinox with Chef Helene Kennan. Chef Kennan is the president of Women's Chefs and Restaurateurs. Tell me, Chef Kennan, how is it? What a revolutionary idea that women should be in the kitchen. I never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, really, huh?
How did it happen that women lost that domain of the kitchen and then regained it? What is your take on the history of this?
Well, I don't think we actually ever really had the professional kitchen domain. I think we definitely ruled the domestic kitchens, but then we weren't really welcome in the professional kitchens, mostly I think because it was deemed that it was just too hard work. We could feed our families, that wasn't so hard, but to feed everybody else was just much more like men's work. But I really think that as we evolved, in the 80s, especially when I started cooking, there weren't many women in the kitchen. It was okay to be a pastry chef. It was okay to be in the pantry making salads. But there were certain things that we still, still remained the man's world, and then that started to change. I think mostly as women came in and said, hey, we're just as qualified as men. We're just as passionate about food as men, and we really can do this work.
So this was really a growing trend through the 80s and 90s, like many other professions.
Mm-hmm. Now, and it's also, I think it's also that naturally, women bring a different sensibility to their food. And, just like, it's a reality that men and women don't do things the same way. And I think as women came into the kitchen and as we've become, kitchens across America and indeed across the world became more balanced, it brought something new to food, to have actually men and women in the kitchen together creating dishes.
You mentioned earlier that at first women came in more as pastry chefs, mm-hmm. and then in certain areas. What's unique about what women are bringing to the kitchen today? Can you give it perhaps one example?
Well, I think, I use the example of if I'm teaching a female apprentice or extern versus a male apprentice and extern, and this is very general terms, okay? Because I don't want people to think, oh, this is an absolute. But in general, the way a woman approaches food and the way a man approaches food, if I put a whole salmon in front of them, and I don't say anything, I don't say cut the head off first, I don't give them any instruction, I just say, how would you do this? It's amazing to see how they approach it. The woman stands there and looks at the fish and turns it over and thinks about it a little more and is very hesitant to cut the head off, and very hesitant indeed to initially even put the knife in. She looks at how can I work with this object, whereas if I put it in front of, if I put it in front of a man, right away he'll cut the head off. He'll be like, boom, and then, and he'll go from there. Now, the man will finish first, and the product will look terrible, and the woman will never get started until they're trained, right? I mean, once they're trained, it's equal. But I'm saying if you want to know about that, put something in front of them at each gender and ask them to do it. Because and you'll really get that a woman kind of works with the ingredient more, and in general, a male looks at it as, it's something to conquer, and it's...
we saw a little bit of that even yesterday with the Iron Bar Chef competition.
Exactly.
Because one of the women contestants was the last one to actually start to assemble the ingredients and to touch those ingredients, and that came out in the commentary.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what's important is one way isn't better than the other way at all. Neither of them really lead to a satisfactory result, right, until you're trained, and then you can both accomplish that. So I think it's really important that we embrace what women bring to the kitchen and we embrace what men bring to the kitchen.
Now, tonight's dinner, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
You and your colleagues are cooking, and we're going to have a dinner created by women tonight.
We are. The girls are in the house tonight.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your colleagues?
Sure. We've assembled a team of women chefs and who are very accomplished, and we did this menu together. We're paired with the wines from Spain, and so I'm doing a gazpacho, a green gazpacho as the first course, and then we have the incoming president for Women Chefs and Restaurateurs, Maureen Pothier, and she is department chair from Johnson & Wales, and she'll be doing the second course, the fish course. We have Mary Dumont, who many of you may recognize her name from Food and Wine's top 10 chefs. I believe it was 2006, 2006. And so Mary's she's a younger, very accomplished chef. So we're happy that she's agreed to do our entree for us this evening. And then our cheese course and our dessert course feature Judy Matera, who has her own company in Boston. She's a very accomplished pastry chef. She's writing a book at the moment, and she specializes in pairing desserts and dessert wines.
Maureen Pothier, you are about to become the next president of the Women Chefs and Restaurateurs. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about the mission of your organization.
Women Chefs and Restaurateurs advances women in the industry and advances education and promotion of women in the industry. And
you talked a little bit about the numbers.
Yeah.
Can you lead in with that?
Sure. Women represent 51% of the hospitality industry, but only 3% of the executive level in the hospitality industry. So that's why we exist, to try to help to fill some more of those upper slots. Yeah, and so our vision is to connect the women of food, is what we do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's an important job. Thank you very much for talking.
Thank you.